Hi, my name is Trayvon. I'm with PW, and this is The Stack. We are at Mercy Eye down the Triple Highway, an exhibit at Poets House featuring work by No Land and Waldman. And I'm here with No Land, one of the poets. Do you want to tell us about the exhibit?
Hello. Um, this is an exhibit of collaborations between myself and Anne Waldman. It manifests with poetry being sort of the spine throughout the whole show, but there are many different forms of art. There's some of our book work together. There are film stills from our cinema projects. There's handmade book covers, there's illuminated manuscript, painted poem scrolls, all kinds of little subtle references to other poets. There's the Blue Flower of Novalis, there's tributes to Allen Ginsberg and Maria Sabina, Bob Dylan, and the centerpiece of the exhibit is our book, The Velvet Wire, which was first put out by Granary Books, and a lot of little references and details. Excited to tell you.
Yeah, we are here with Anne Waldman. If you'd like to tell us about the exhibit.
I'd love to. I'm so happy we're sitting in it. It's special. And as you know, it's an intergenerational project, which is a great way to be in the world in these times, just feeling like we're all a lot closer in a lot of ways with a lot of the similar sort of struggles and so on, making the work. The word poetry comes from poesis, which means making, actually, making in a kind of hands-on sense. It's not just emoting and talking about how you feel all the time and the vast, things going on. So it's very located. I feel this show working through I think Nolan likes to call it the spine. Poetry is the spine for everything. And you have all these rib cage reaching out to catch things, but also to open up the cage, let everything come out. So it's very material, working with gorgeous materials. Our book, The Velvet Wire, was a great experience working with Granary. As a kind of high-end product in terms of what went into it and, more like an art object. And so we wanted to bring it to the people, get it down to earth, which I think we do in this show. This goes beyond a book. And so there are very many manifestations of not only the poetry, but what the poetry has suggested, the incredible artwork of Nolan, the photographs, which are documents, but also portraiture and art, really incredible compositions in and of themselves. And then a sort of tracking, and I use the word tentacular a lot, just the tracking of these different roads, so to speak, and the triple highway, again, the locations of where we've mostly worked together. New York, starting when we met at a protest on May Day, and sort of connected in maybe oblique ways that then became very meaningful and had resonance, and I see that meaning as an incredible point of contact through activism, through the work, through where we were at that time, 10 years ago, maybe a little over, and then going through COVID and all the struggles that we've all been through, and in this city, what we were able to do in terms of pop-up ventures and keeping community together, I think is also, you feel that in here. You feel the the kind of language, this dream work, et cetera, things going through our systems, so to speak. So it represents, for me, it's an archive in and of itself, of friendship, I think very committed friendship, of special trips in Mexico that were really important to doing work there and continuing what I call the rhizoma, ongoing rhizome. And then Colorado, of course, there's the centerpiece of the Kerouac School and Naropa, where Nolan's taught and presented and so on. So New York, Colorado, Mexico, that have these simultaneous connectivity. And I'm just delighted at how it's, organized. It's, in these vitrines and representing different, you have a representation of the sort of table that No Land uses to present her work. It's a very improvised space in a way, but also very artistically composed, let's put it that way. And then highlight of different, aspects of the journey throughout the show. So, represented by even Bard Kinetic. No Land did the cover for that is in here. Some of the other ways we've connected, she being, a close follower of the Beat literary generation. So lineages, actual history. Often you work with people. I'm working always with poets of the past, whether it's William Blake or anyway, people not walking around in New York City. So, that it's a living kind of archive, I feel it has expanded my mind for future projects and ongoing work.
Yes, thank you. Tell me about the title of your exhibit and the emphasis on traveling from one place to another and doing so while mercy-eyed.
Mercy-eyed and the triple highway. So mercy-eyed is, compassion, that you see with compassion. The road is a spiritual path. These spiritual paths that have a kind of quality of their own. You could say heaven, earth, man. You could think about being in a city, being in a more rural setting, being out under the sky, being inside buildings, being, in work mode, all the different ways you can share space. And the range of the photography covers a lot of that, I think. And then the sense of, the triad. I've talked about this before in terms of, having to create space, having to create a sense of a path for yourself, the interior, the secret stuff that goes on, then you're taking it a little bit out with your eye of compassion into the world, a kind of almost a Buddhist Mahayana thing where you work in the world, and then you take it into public space. And so you're going from a kind of tantric, preparation in the laboratory into moving it forward, seeing how it looks. So in a way, this came to be that middle space of seeing how these things all look together and then taking it to the public, being in a safe poet armored kingdom. I don't know what to call this. It's everything, a mountain, a shrine, a sanctuary.
Yes, so the poet is a seeker, a roaming figure. I think of the troubadour, the vagabond, this sense that the poet is seeking not only sort of the jewels or wisdom of this earthly plane, but sort of, spiritually seeking other realms and feeling other realms come through. So that's very much, this idea of the highway or the path, and it can also be literally this idea of the triple highway. We have most of our work together has been in New York, Mexico, and Colorado. So there's 3 roads intertwining. And mercy-eyed, I just think of sort of a figure walking down the path with a consciousness of compassion and sort of the poet's vow that you'll be looking and investigating, even maybe, persons or ideas that you don't agree with. You're sort of the observer. And there's a compassion vow in that. This idea that the poet has to sort of report back from this compassionate looking. And I also would mention that the triple highway comes from a poem. Both Mercy, Sister Mercy was a title that Anne had on Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Review tour in the 70s. She wrote a poem for that tour called Shaman Hisses. And one of my favorite lines from that was, "Shaman's lady is lovely, shaman's lady is wise." she'll take your words down the triple highway. So at night, may I roam. So at dawn, may I roam. And so we kind of threaded different pieces of past projects. I also made a film called Mercy-Eyed with Anne. So just endless little details and references.
Yes. Before the exhibit came together, you guys put a collaborative book together, The Velvet Wire. Can you tell us
Right.
about that?
Well, the Velvet Wire, Granary Press, has a great tradition of doing poets, beyond just, simple books on the page. They do that as well. Anthologies, art books, putting artists and writers together. This was special because we both shared a lot of the history of the recent work. And then we also had the gift of, Nolan's particular visual gifts. And then we had, my sense of the art book, I think, from working with Granary in the past. And then the meticulous work that we were able to do was sort of collaborative with them. Nolan was checking the paper and checking the ink and all the fine details of making a poesis. So I think that it's only half the book. Anybody else is interested, we'll do another Samizdat version.
Yeah.
We have then the other version, which was then to make it more accessible to people coming to an event or a reading such as this one. And it still has, this kind of magic, I think, to it. The two they're not different versions, they're sort of iterations in a way. Yeah. So very happy, and I'm curious about what was left out. I was thinking just now, I want to see all the work that's not in that book. See if we can do an addenda.
So The Velvet Wire is a book of fine art and poetry. It was first published by Granary Books. Mary Catherine Kinneberg had this idea when she approached us for an intergenerational sort of lineage transmission. And it took on all different iterations. At one point, it was going to be sort of a reliquary of all the collaborations Anne and I had done together. I think there's about 40 or something like that over the last almost 15 years. So the book did have to get more practical in terms it had to become a little slimmer. And it became actually more of a sort of devotional writings to each other. A lot of references from our collaborations and secret codes, little, bits of our correspondence. There's notes where she's telling me that I need to, practice my Buddhist management of emotion and make sure I'm eating enough next to, a line of William Blake, and just an incredible mosaic. And Granary Books put that edition out, and then I made another version with my press called Translucent Flower, a little bit hoping for something slightly more accessible to our community. And that version, as well as the Granary version, were very much inspired by the Bardo Matrix Press, which was working out of Kathmandu in the 70s. A lot of fine, delicate papers, rice paper, lokta paper, just this sort of fragile, magical feel that is different than a sort of traditional published book. Maybe almost too fragile to be really passed around, but just that kind of sense of like a codex or a document that's worth paying careful attention to because of its delicacy and fragile nature.
And the Velvet Wire has a very palpable and handcrafted feel. Why was it important to maintain that physical aesthetic in this age of digital ease?
I would say any work that can be done now to sort of affirm our humanness, our organic, in this age of just digital wash. There's a sort of protest element almost in going backwards, and just wanting to bring in those energies into our future. But I would also say there's almost an anarchistic aspect in the sense that I'm using what's available in my house. So the handmade cover of the book, when I first made it by hand, it was on a manila envelope that I threw black ink on. There's a lot of just, powder and iridescent kind of dusts. There's gold thread. There's low-coated paper that was actually sourced from Nepal, where the inspiration really came from. So, just that it creates a dimension. It's not just sending it off and having it be printed however someone decides in an office. It's like a real care of almost like a human creation that's important, I think, to keep alive, and it has an energy about it. A lot of humans have, worked with. We had incredible helpers and community.
Thank you.
Well, I think to maintain that, you have to be kind of with it, almost in a meditative way, really realizing that when you get to something that's working and you feel like you combined your, got all your assorted ideas and feelings about it and your craft and so on together, that when it's working, when it feels right, you have a high standard for yourself. And so that's so important, I think, for all artists working, of course, and for poets to have the opportunity. Some poets are very visual and musical, and of course we have a deep connection also to performance and working with musicians, primarily in the free jazz world and beyond. But so that comes in as well. And I think, I guess the importance, you feel like these transitions, you go from what's in your mind, your imagination, and you're putting it into language, putting it into image, then you're making a book and is selected. It's not even the whole thing. So then how much is going to carry? So that's always important. And then who is it for? And so you think of, you have to love it yourself. You have to love it yourself before you give it to the world. So that's important. I think that's what I was realizing. And so I'll be very sad when this goes, because in a way it shows this sort of open-hearted, different trajectories that go on here, and also are documented with friendships. So that's amazing. And then to be clued into, things that younger folk are doing anyway, and then, we're all doing a very, from a certain point of view, just the great treasure work, the treasure work of, I talk now about leaving little threads and hints in all of the crevices of our world as we're finding our civilization being threatened and things being erased and things being destroyed, and, whether they're book burnings in Texas or rewriting the history books, to not include everything that's gone on. So that's part of our job as poets, to be guardians. And there's the word archon that's sometimes used, the archons of the archive. So you're guardians of the history, because people can erase history, they can rewrite it, they can present a version to the world. So whatever happens, whether a part of the world is destroyed, we're going to have to build from the bottom up again. It's just unclear. But to have those threads of the kind of imaginative, artistic vision of how to be in the world, I think we're organically made to make art.
Can you tell us about the process of assembling and maintaining a physical archive?
Well, I'm in charge somewhat of seeing that the archive at the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics in Colorado, which sits in a place called Iron Mountain. You'd think that'd be enough. Okay, where are archives in the Iron Mountain? Okay, well, that's to outlast plutonium, whatever. But actually, it needs to go to an institution that can take care of it properly, because it's mainly a oral archive. It's videos and tapes going back 50 years. So all that will need, the next iteration, 20 years from now, what we're doing now is obsolete, possibly. And then Where do you go from that? What are we looking at? Is AI going to be in charge? I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
So very concerned. We need to find the right mix of energy for where that will be. I want it to be in a place that makes it visible. So many people are in it, from a lot of the so-called beats, Beatler and movement with Burroughs, Ginsberg, Gregory Corso, Joanne Kiger, Diane de Prima, to the New York School, which includes an early visit of John Cage, and includes Ashbery and Cameron Elmsley and Kenneth Koch and second generationers, and then incredible people like Amiri Baraka came very regularly to the school, to David Henderson, to Sonia Sanchez. I mean, just a lot of variety. It was a very, it still continues. We have a session this summer, pretty much all of June, with the wonderful title, Metabolic Thrum. Doesn't that just make you want to jump up and fly to Boulder and take down the Iron Mountain and rescue the archive and put it in, I don't know, where should it be? I wish Poets House were a city block. I wanted it to go at one point to the Dylan archive, the Bob Dylan thing in Tulsa, but they don't have the facilities to really take care of it. And then, we have to find a college that's still open after all the craziness going on. Anyway, I'm deeply devoted to archive because I receive things, hearing a tape of Antonin Artaud, hearing a tape of Vladimir Mayakovsky, the Russian poet, where there's just 10 minutes in the world of these poets. Even Gertrude Stein only has 20 minutes recorded. And so to hear the actual voice, the physical breath of the poets is what it's all about. And then you hear the amazing, language and the ideas and all of that, music.
When I was a much younger poet, I had just dropped out of art school. And the way I was getting my education was by putting on the Naropa Kerouac School audio archive every morning. I would sort of make my coffee, and I would put on a class from Naropa in the 70s. I could take a class with Allen Ginsberg or William Burroughs or Diane de Prima, and I could actually sit in their class because someone had left the tape running, and then someone else had digitized it, uploaded it to the internet. You can hear it on, I think, archive.org, the Kerouac School. So just this sense that all the times you can be inhabiting other times through preserving an archive, and you can time travel. It's really, it's very trippy. So, you can be in any time if you can sort of access that kind of materials, which is why, people who work to open up these kind of closed archives, that was important to me also as a younger artist. I was working with a lot of the sort of cyber hackers and people who were on the side of open information and freedom of information, and whatever censorship fights are how they change throughout the decades. But the archive remains the most direct way to access. We worked here with texts of William Blake's. We worked with presses from the 1970s and the mimeograph revolution and all these different preserved modes of poetry.
And what are you hoping visitors take away from the exhibit?
I want this sort of electricity that I feel when I hear Anne or when I'm working inspired. I want to relay that to whoever's looking, that there's a mission that we feel called to create and, just keep exploring our consciousness, our work, our friendships, and, almost this sense that the poet is you're dreaming, you're imagining other worlds, you're making this life, all that it really can be by a sense of magic and transmission. And there's something I'm burning to tell you, so please read it. And just so grateful to Poets House because, especially the book, making it accessible to everyone to be able to view it in this way, in the round, with all this translucent, luminescent light. And yeah, just very, very grateful.
Or a generative energy to do more to make sure this travels. I'd like to think of it traveling to poetry places sympathetic to poetry that have galleries such as this. There are various ones across the land. And, if they find out about it or know about it, I think there would be interest. So that's my hope, that this can stay in the kind of compositional form that it's in for a while, and then also find a home. I have connections in Michigan, and then there's, Library of Congress, New York Public Library, NYU. There are possibilities for things being safe, but they might just sit in boxes. So I would like to think this could be seen. I'm glad we're making a video also of the show itself. That'll be helpful.
In that vein, now that you're in your closing weeks, are there plans or hopes of new locations?
Yes, I think there's some nibbles, and I think now that we know it can travel, we should work a little harder exploring. I have some contacts out in those various worlds after all these years, and I think there'd be some interest. It's not about selling art the way, certain things could be, I'm sure, things that are copies, editions of particular visuals and photographs, of course. It can also flow in that way. That's always helpful, but just that it could be appreciated beyond the art gallery world of pressure to, sell and maintain. I would like to think it could be maintained in a way as its collective self.
Yes, we have a little bit of interest for where the exhibition may tour. But open to ideas if anyone wants to get in touch. And also, I'm just really hoping that people will come see the work.
Well, I'm just grateful that we've had this opportunity not only to have the gallery space here at Poets House, but also be able to do 2 performances, do a terrific workshop with people who we're still in touch with, to sense that there's an ongoing idea of what, how we've worked, how we work in community, how we work with collaboration, because we both had musicians at the shows. And we invited Stephen Taylor, who had worked with Allen Ginsberg, who brought in Allen Ginsberg's harmonium, which in fact is a kind of archival, very special object. I loved it when a few people came up at the end of performance and wanted to touch it. I just want to touch it's called a shruti box in India. Shruti, it's a known instrument. It's basically harmonium, and you're pumping the heartbeat. And I traveled with Allen while he was using it. And so even in the back of when we're singing William Blake to he set some of the songs of innocence and experience to music, but I hear Allen's voice echoing. So again, feeling like this goes beyond, who's here right now. And William Blake, of course, can continue. I think he's pretty good for any time.
So it's up until February 21st. Please feel free to come down to Poets House in Tribeca. It's a wonderful library space where you can spend the day reading and working overlooking the Hudson. It's really beautiful. I don't know if you can see the sunset or yes. Very peaceful. We're very grateful to the curator, John Linsler. And yeah, please come while it's still up. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.